Quick question, why does it seem like everyone is rich right now? Everyone's purchasing new iPhones, going on nice vacations, buying designer clothes, and they're door dashing every other day. But it's also true that everyone is broke, stressed, and one emergency away from being on Dave Ramsey's show. So what's the deal? The deal is we're living through something called luxury poverty. It's where you can purchase the little things, but the simple dream of a starter home and starting a family feels financially impossible. So let's break this down, because the answer isn't as simple as it seems. Luxury poverty is when adulting milestones get so expensive that people just say screw it. I'll throw my money into smaller, immediate luxuries such as TikTok shop instead of saving for a home. Not because people are dumb, not because they're lazy, but because the numbers stopped working the way they used to. And the weird part is, the stuff that used to signal wealth got cheaper, and while the stuff that actually builds stability got insanely expensive. So let's talk about what I call economic inversion. How the financial landscape flipped in a way that big life goals became harder and smaller consumer purchases became easier. Step 1, the thing that actually builds a life, the foundational milestones, became shockingly expensive. Take housing, for example. After the 2008 financial crisis, construction never recovered fast enough to meet demand. And there simply aren't enough homes being built relative to the number of people who want them. The shortages helped push home prices to record highs, making the dream of even a modest single-family home feel unattainable for many. At the same time, wages stopped keeping pace with how much workers actually produce. Between the late 1940s and the early 1970s, workers' pay and productivity grew more or less together, meaning if the economy was producing more, typical workers were rewarded with much higher wages. But since the late 1970s, that connection is broken down. Productivity keeps rising, but the wages of most workers have barely even budged. And then there's education. The total amount of student loan debt in the US has ballooned into the trillions of dollars, making college a financial burden that many carry well into adulthood. That's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. That's money that could have gone towards a down payment, savings, or starting a family. So if your income doesn't grow much, and the biggest things you're told to spend your life on cost more and more, you begin to reallocate your money. That brings us to step 2 of the inversion. The stuff that looks rich has actually gotten easier to afford. Thanks to globalization and massive improvements in technology and manufacturing, the cost of many consumer electronics, from TVs to computers, has dropped dramatically over the last few decades. And finally, step 3. People optimize for what they can actually afford. A $5 Starbucks latte sounds delightful. A $400 a month Ozempic shot feels justified. A $2,000 vacation to Cancun? That sounds amazing. So instead of saving for homes or paying down debt, people spend money on things that give them that small hit of dopamine right now, something they can control. And that's the inversion. Building a future got harder, but buying the feeling of progress got way easier. So let's make this personal. Imagine being 26 or 27. You're employed, you're responsible, you're officially adulting. But every right move feels like it's going backward. You try saving for a down payment, your rent goes up. You work on paying down debt, groceries quietly take the difference. You hear, just start investing early. And you wonder what money that advice is meant for. Over time, something shifts. You stop aiming for the future, not because you don't care, but because the future starts to feel unreachable. So you focus on what moves the needle. Not reckless spending, manageable spending in your eyes. A gym that gives your day some structure. Clothes that make you feel presentable and caught up. A phone that makes daily life feel smoother and less chaotic. But these purchases aren't random. They're substitutes for actual progress. They're ways to feel like your effort is producing something, even when the bigger milestones stay out of reach. And when enough people start living this way, it changes how things look from the outside. But looking stable and being stable aren't the same thing. A nice watch doesn't mean wealth. A new phone doesn't mean security. It only tells you one thing: they spent their money. Now we add some gasoline onto the fire. Over the last few years, it became incredibly easy to make almost anything feel affordable. Klarna, Afterpay, Affirm, buy now, pay later, turn a $300 purchase into just 4 payments of $75. Or worse, 10 easy payments of $29.99. And psychologically, that matters. Because your brain isn't asking, can I afford this? It's asking, can I make that small little monthly payment? That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. The federal agency that oversees financial products like credit cards and loans has documented how buy now, pay later usages exploded between 2019 and 2023, with tens of millions of Americans using these services regularly. So the line between I can afford it and I can make the payment starts to blur. And when that line disappears, debt starts to stack up. Because now someone can look like they're thriving. Nice clothes, new technology, trips, dinners out, while quietly juggling payments across 5 different applications. That's how you end up with a generation that looks financially healthy, while their credit score, savings, and long-term security are under constant pressure. And this isn't all because people are reckless, well, some are, but because the system made looking okay easier than actually being okay. And now here's one of the clearest signs that something fundamental about adulthood has changed. More young adults are living with their parents, and not because their children are failing at life, but because the traditional path into adulthood has become much harder to follow. According to Pew Research Center, in 2023, about 18% of US adults ages 25 to 34 were living in their parents' home. And in some metropolitan areas, that number is over 30%. And that's just adults in their late 20s and early 30s. If you're looking between ages 18 to 24, well over half of young adults in that age group are still living at home with their parents. And I want to be clear here. Living with your parents right now can absolutely be a smart financial choice. You can save more money, you can pay off debt, and build a nice cushion before you move out. That's being practical, but it's also a signal, a clear indicator that the old predictable sequence of growing up and getting out of your parents' house as quick as possible isn't the same way anymore. Not because people don't like to, but because they just simply can't afford to. There used to be that sense that adulthood followed a rough pattern: finish school, get a job, move out, and build your own life. That sequence was never easy, but it was achievable for many. Today, housing costs alone can devour a paycheck before you even save a dime. Student debt lingers, rent climbs faster than raises, and then suddenly the step of leaving home feels like a financial mountain instead of a natural next move. So when you see your friends or other young adults still living at home, it's not just a quirk, it's social proof that the traditional progression into independence has been warped by economic forces. It doesn't mean people aren't trying, it means independence now costs more than most people can afford. And this is the part nobody really wants to say out loud. Luxury poverty isn't about bad budgeting or $5 lattes. It's what happens when the basic requirements for a stable adult life become financially out of reach. Think about what we've already walked through. Housing costs rose faster than income. Education, which was supposed to open doors, now comes with decades of debt. And wages didn't grow fast enough to keep pace with either one. So for a lot of people, the traditional version of getting ahead just simply stopped working. So instead of putting money towards long-term goals that feel impossible, people redirect it naturally towards things that feel achievable. The things they can see, the things they can use, the things that just make their daily life feel a little bit better right now. The gym membership, the phone, the clothes, the experiences. Not because people are careless, but because these are the only places where progress still feels tangible. And from the outside, it looks fine. We look at those visible signs and tell ourselves, see, they're doing okay. If they can afford that, they must be doing fine. But that's the illusion, because looking comfortable isn't the same as being financially secure. And having nice things doesn't mean you're building anything long-term. If this were really just about budgeting, or discipline, or better individual choices, we would have fixed this by now. But what we're seeing isn't widespread personal failure. It's an economy where the cost of stability rose faster than the ability to earn it. And luxury poverty is what's filling the gap. So with all that doom and gloom, what do we actually do with all of this? Because if you're watching this and feeling a mix of relief and frustration, like, okay, that explains a lot, but what now? That reaction makes sense. You don't fix something this big with a moral lecture. And being told to stop buying coffee or cancel every subscription ignores actually what is putting pressure on people's lives. But even in a system like this, you're not powerless. You can't control housing prices, you can't undo the student loan debt overnight, but you can keep yourself from quietly becoming the victim of it. The first step is getting honest about why you spend and what you actually need. Some spending isn't optional, obviously. You need a place to live, you need food, and you need transportation. So start there. Figure out, honestly, what it costs you to live. Not what social media says, not what your friends or family say, but what your real baseline is. The second step is to understand what's coming in. Not in theory, not on a good month, but what you actually bring in on a monthly basis. Because you can't make intentional decisions without knowing the numbers, and avoiding them doesn't make them less real. The third step is having an honest conversation with yourself about your needs versus your wants. Not from a place of guilt, from a place of clarity. Once you have that clarity, this is where goals start to matter. And these aren't vague goals. Real, stabilizing goals. Paying down high interest debt, so it stops following you everywhere. Contributing consistently to retirement, even if it's small. Setting aside money for long-term plans, whether that's a move, a home, or simply more options in the future. This kind of progress is quiet. It's not flashy, doesn't show up online, and it slowly reduces the number of things that can knock you off balance in the future. And finally, be kind to yourself, but stay awake. Don't let rent, subscriptions, and small comforts quietly destroy your budget. And don't let luxury poverty turn into an identity you carry. If any of this video felt uncomfortably familiar, that's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because you're trying to build a normal life in an economy that quietly changed the rules. Luxury poverty isn't a personal failure. It's a pattern a lot of people fall into when stability gets harder to afford and short-term comfort is all that feels reachable. Seeing that pattern doesn't magically fix everything, but it does give you back something really important: clarity. And clarity is what allows you to make informed decisions instead of reacting out of stress or self-blame. If you're feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or behind, you're not alone. On this channel, I spend a lot of time breaking down the challenges that younger generations are facing and sharing my own experiences navigating them. Honest conversations about work, money, and how to move forward when the path isn't obvious anymore. If this video helped you put words to something you've been feeling, you're not alone and you're not crazy. Thanks for watching.